Hey folks, this is Rhykker, and last week I took part in a live roundtable discussion with some of the dev team of Torchlight Infinite, plus some special guests about aRPGs. Two main topics were covered. First off, what makes a good aRPG? Lots of thoughts were shared there, and the other main part was about monetization. And the Torchlight Infinite dev team did not shy away from the tough questions about pay to win. So I'm posting that discussion here in this video, with just some slight edits to shorten it a bit and add a note here and there. The roundtable was hosted by streamer Rich W. Campbell, who did a fantastic job hosting. We had as a guest aRPG analytical content creator Tenkiei. We had David Brevik, one of the creators of Diablo and the aRPG genre. And then from the Torchlight Infinite team, we had Jack, the director of product, and Ian, the community manager.
David, I'm curious to hear how you look at the space in general, because I feel like you have very different eyes than all of us. So when you're assessing the aRPG, the field of games that's coming out, what are you actually looking for in a good aRPG game?
Well, there are a million factors that I take into consideration when I'm making or at least evaluating aRPGs. I think the number one thing for me is kind of feel and control. I love being able to that kind of moment to moment feeling of power and being able to play in different styles and stuff like that. That's the thing that attracts me most to aRPGs. And so if that's solid, then I really feel like I can get into an aRPG. I have a lot of trouble getting into something that doesn't have that kind of that great feeling. And then I think that beyond that, any kind of like randomization is super important to me, and I think a pillar of the genre. And so I love seeing all the randomization, different ways that they're doing randomization, how they're offsetting randomization, all sorts of things that really create these cool systems. And then I'm also looking for innovation. Like what about this aRPG is different than the other aRPGs out there? What sets it apart? What makes it kind of a new experience or a different experience? And what are they bringing to the genre? And those are all kind of the different factors I look at whenever I play any other aRPG.
I feel like for me, when I'm looking at builds and different things like that, I always love the feeling when there's a build and I look at it and I feel like I'm getting away with something by playing it. Like I feel like I shouldn't be allowed to play this build. And Ten, that was one of the things when I was actually, even with your Torchlight build recently, the build that you made where it's all based around getting out a bunch of wilt damage and watching everything pop, right? I felt like that it felt so good. I felt like I was getting away with something. Is that something that you're looking for a lot of the time? Like those crazy builds, Ten?
It depends. It's when an idea strikes me. With that one, I definitely felt like I was cheating somehow. Yeah. I also, with a Path of Exile build, felt like I was cheating when I was playing an Ignite-based Black Flame Occultist, where I was like, oh, I'll just stack a bunch of physical damage, but since all damage ignites, now I have these huge fire pops everywhere and the screen just explodes. So I look for things where there's really strong mechanical interactions. And yeah, it ultimately ends up feeling like cheating in some way or another. It's not really cheating, though. It's how the devs intended, but maybe not the way they thought you'd play it.
Yeah, like David, you might be able to speak on that a little bit more, because that's not a question I've ever been able to ask. Like when there are those crazy builds, how often are the devs trying to create lines for those builds to be made, and how much is it completely emergent by players?
I think it's kind of a balance. We definitely design mechanics where things fit together and work together, and we do that on purpose. But oftentimes there are unintended consequences to design that is like, the fact of the matter is that, in an audience full of thousands, hundreds of thousands, whatever players, they can find these combinations much faster than a group of 20 or 40 or whatever people making the game, right? So they have all these kind of unique perspectives. It's funny, whenever I make any kind of game, I'll be making it, I'll test something and I'll hand it to somebody else and they'll play the game completely differently than me. And I was like, God, I never even thought about playing it that way or whatever. And so I think that same kind of thing happens on all levels of game development, especially when you're trying to create different builds and skills and how they interact and those kind of systems. You get a lot of kind of emergent behavior that you wasn't really intended. It's often really cool though, and you love to support and find.
How often do you look at a build and you're just like, oh no, what am I gonna do? We gotta get rid of this one.
No, I mean, I love that. I think that finding those builds or whatever is really fun. I mean, I think that other devs can confirm, but like I like to keep those things in, or at least keep them in for a while, and then maybe in a seasonal kind of thing, kind of adjust the balance or something like that. But kind of keep it from one season to the next or whatever. I like that when they find those kind of things that it's fun. It's fun. It's great. Feels kind of like you're cheating, and it's like I'm smarter than the devs or whatever way you want to kind of pose that. And like I've won the game in a lot of ways, and that can feel really good and powerful. And so finding those things is always is just the chef's kiss of the season.
Yeah, I feel like now too, you bring up seasons, and that has been, when I look at aRPGs now, seasons really are that thing that keeps popping up. It feels a little bit newer. I mean, it's been around for a while now. I'm trying to think the first one that really did it.
Probably
was
PoE.
PoE? Yeah, I think it was PoE. Maybe. So, I mean, we could actually look that up. I mean, PoE was one of the first ones for me. And then obviously Reaper of Souls started to bring in the seasons as well. But the cool thing with seasons is it's almost like a rush to which build am I going to start with? What's my goal to actually win? And then what alt am I going to pick up? With the season gameplay, Rhykker, is that something that you're looking for now in aRPGs? Like, how has it changed how you look at the genre?
It's funny, when seasons were first announced, I thought of it like, why would I want to start fresh? I put all this effort into my character. I'm going to play season just to get like the cosmetic reward, and then I'm going back to non-season. I have never gone back to non-season. I only come back to season. I think it has dominated the aRPG landscape and just completely taken over. We see those spike, that resurgence in players every time. It builds excitement. It's this big hype moment. I think PoE has perfected the formula in figuring out the right cadence in how long to wait before delivering that next season. And they've really set a standard for everyone else to live up to. And it has forever shaped the landscape. If you launch without seasons now, everyone's asking, where's the season?
Yeah, Jack, I'm curious on your side, like how that actually felt when you're making Torchlight Infinite, because we're talking about this giant field of aRPGs, and I feel like there are like so many great takes in Torchlight Infinite on all of those different things. So how did you look at the giant scope of aRPGs and go, okay, this is something I want to include in my game. This is something that I want to include in.
Really good question. So as we see the topic today, so what makes a good aRPG, right? So when we started this project, we definitely had quite a lot of talks on this topic, because as a player, we play also quite a lot of aRPG when we are back to high school times. And we can say most of our dev guys, they are really hardcore players and huge fans of this genre. And when we want to make our own game, for sure, we want to learn from these masterpieces, of course, like Diablo, Torchlight, PoE. So we really enjoy playing these games. But when we come to our games, so what we're thinking, and we have quite a lot of discussions. In the end, we find 5 pillars. We think it's important to support a good aRPG. That is rich builds. So we already talk a lot. We started the conversation with builds, right? So rich builds definitely is one pillar. And the other is, second, it's challenging grinding. So we like grind, players like grinding. So but you should with challenging. A third is rewarding loot. When you're grinding, you feel the loot is rewarding. It's just value your time, invest in the game. And the 2 other thing is fully customized crafting. We like craft our own item rather than just find a job. The last thing we think is free trade. So there's a lot of different play style between different players, but there actually do have some players, they just enjoy when they trade their rare item to other players with a really high price, right? So after a long discussion, we found these 5 pillars that we believe if we want to make a good ARPG, we should put these 5 pillars in the ground of our game.
Yeah.
So that's our thinking.
And there's one little addition to the point where I think the entire dev team is just huge fans of this is that there is like a requirement for us to be on the dev team is that you have to spend at least 1,000 hours in this ARPG genre. That's like one of the tricky
It's a
parts.
minimum request
for
if you want to apply a designer role.
Yeah. So talking about the core enjoyment of the game, what do you think as the designer creator of Diablo series, David, what do you think is the core enjoyment of playing in such ARPG game? Yeah.
Well, I think that you guys covered it pretty well there. That's there's builds, rewarding loot, challenge. I think that's one thing that I think that not all ARPGs get right. I love that fine balance of challenge is can be so rewarding. I think that there's kind of ebbs and flows to the kind of action, and having situations that arise either randomly or crafted that create all sorts of new challenges and new ways of thinking about the game, or make a mess of somebody's builds. Like, I think that those kind of things really are fun, and so I think that having challenge is one of my keys as well. I really, if it's too easy, then I get bored. So making sure that the challenge is increasing is something that I look for as well.
I feel like something that's really hard to hit right in ARPGs, and I feel like even some of my favorite ARPGs weren't able to do it perfectly, though, is how that difficulty scales. I feel like you get in these places sometimes where you're like, okay, I'm stuck playing this build right now. I know what my next step is, but I'm not quite good enough to be able to grind up the currency as fast as I would want. I feel like I've plateaued. And I've always imagined that must be like one of the hardest things to figure out as a developer. One of the compliments I will give to Torchlight Infinite is I felt a very smooth progression. And I'm curious, how do you actually figure something like that out? Like, how do you actually go, okay, this is what the player is going to be experiencing, to get from that first time you take down the Traveler to getting all the way up to cranking your maps to the hardest difficulty that's available in the game?
If we answer this question, is actually first, of course, you have a lot of experience in other games, because when you want to create a new game, you are not creating a game from scratch, right? So because you will made a lot of mistakes, but if you play quite a lot of these games, you may be thinking, this game doing great, this game maybe not. But so we will first from our previous game experience. Then the designers, of course, they will calculate all these numbers, balancing, and then implement in the game. The last thing we would do is just testing, play yourself. So all of our devs, even so the community managers, they just before launch, they really played quite a lot. And they will get the feedback. It's not we just see the data. Some other developers, they really believe in data. They do A/B test or other things. But in our case, we just try to believe in ourselves. So because we are the players, we know if there's something too hard or it's too easy or the currency is overproduced or something. So to just play the game a lot. Then we just go to CBT. The three before the OBT, we take 3 rounds of the CBT. And you see when the players, they join the community and they join the game, it's the best part. As we mentioned before, it's really the best part for the devs. When you see your game, even it's closed beta, but it's alive. It's the first time it's alive. You see the real actions, and you see that time you see the data, but it's just the data will be just to double check if your design is right. But then it's play with the players. It's also important, and that's so in the next version or next beta, we just try to improve the things and correct the things goes wrong. So that's it. Yeah, that's how I did this.
That's why I've spent more than 50 hours playing Torchlight since it launched. I know, except for collecting the player feedback, I've been playing Torchlight for a long time.
Yeah, I think that's an excellent answer, and it's a very similar answer to mine, which is that it's exactly what it is. It's math, like we math it all out, and then it's the play testing, and the play testing is just so important, and it's knowing your game. We would spend hours and hours and hours playing the game, over and over again, to try and find the different builds in different places. That's just so important. And then with the new tools that are available today, having such, like way back when I was making Diablo 2, we didn't have access to a community, right? So all of the being able to like play with people, even on Twitch, or being able to group up and do things, or whatever, doing activities with the community and having Discord and real-time feedback and all these kind of stuff. These kind of tools that we have today to interact with the community is just fabulous. And having the community involved is not only extremely exciting for the dev, but also just makes everybody really happy, because you're getting great feedback from the community. The community feels listened to. We get great feedback. It's this great symbiosis, this great way that we can work together to create something awesome.
As a player, I definitely noticed the differences between the closed beta test 3 and the open beta test. One thing that I didn't like too much in closed beta test 3 was some of the legendary items were really cool, but they were so common that they didn't feel very valuable or impactful. I could get them for flame sand, basically pennies, not literal pennies, of course, but a currency that drops a lot. And then going into the open beta, a lot of these items are rarer. And it's something that I also noticed in Path of Exile, where in 3.19, a lot of unique items are significantly rarer than they were. Common enough that you can still get them, but it feels meaningful to pick it up because, oh, wait, I can actually sell this to someone and they're going to use it. It's not just vendor trash I leave on the floor. And that was one change that I really noticed going from a closed beta to the open beta, and I definitely appreciate.
Yeah, I think that's a cool thing to bring up as well, because I mean, PoE, I know that was one of the things that they were focused on, with trying to make not all legendaries feel like they were just alks, which was like a hard change. But there's also like that weird balance, because we all love loot pinatas to happen inside of our aRPGs, right? But nobody wants to stand there the entire day and just pick up like nonsense loot and be kind of like hard stuck just picking up loot. And I think that, when I look at Torchlight, there's a pretty interesting balance. I mean, first of all, the game has a loot filter in it, which I thought was, I don't think I've ever seen that before in an aRPG. And
several.
Okay. I feel like I've never checked that in the settings before.
Sorry, I didn't mean to interrupt, but Grim Dawn has a built-in loot filter. Last Epoch has a built-in loot filter. It's, I'd say, pretty common these days with modern games, but it's definitely an innovation on a lot of the older games that didn't have a built-in loot filter, PoE included.
Yeah. I mean, for a lot of those like older games, you had to go and get one, but it was part of your workflow, right? And now the question is, even when the loot filter comes in, what loot do you want to be picking up and still feeling rewarded? And Rhykker, like I think in Torchlight, it's definitely interesting, but I'm curious how you feel about all aRPGs. Like how much loot do you want to be seeing? How much do you actually want to pick up?
Oh man, that's a great question. I feel so loot filters were a solution to a problem of too much loot dropping. I wonder if there could be some alternative means of solving that, but because some games are like unplayable without loot filters, without naming names. We kind of know which some of those are. You want loot to remain exciting when everything is dropping all the time and you don't know, everything is just so blasé. Then the whole drive of playing the game, which is finding those exciting drops, is just gone. So loot filters, I think, work best when they're there. Not so much to filter out the garbage, but to help you find specifically what you're looking for, to maybe call out something that you would otherwise miss because it's maybe a little harder to notice. But yeah, you definitely want to be finding just enough loot that loot remains exciting, but not so much that it gets boring. I mean, I don't know if any of you guys played with drop mods way back in the day in D2, where it's like, oh, I installed this mod, now I'm getting drops that happen all the time, and it's fun for 10 minutes, and then you burn out on the game.
I'm curious, David, how you look at it, right? Because for example, you know, raw currency is usually something that's pretty easy as a player, at least how I feel, to understand. You're like, oh wow, this is a big piece of raw currency. I feel like I'm progressing. But as a like actual game designer, what's your thought process on how do I make the grinding feel rewarded when it can be relatively jigsaw progression? Like it can go a little while before a big piece drops or before a big piece of raw currency drops. So how do you go about solving that problem?
Well, there's a bunch of technical ways that you can do it, including a system that's behind the scenes that says, hey, it's been a little while since you've dropped something. Let's kind of start to boost up those percentages a little bit. But there's, you know, it just depends on what kind of game that you're trying to make. One of the things, like if you're going to have free trading, which is a great idea, like having stuff drop, there's this balance, right? Because if it drops too often, then your market is just flooded with those items. If it doesn't drop very often, then you know it can take a long time before the item you're looking for actually drops. So I think that it all comes down to that balance. There's a bunch of different systems, like, hey, we know what kind of character you're playing and maybe a little bit more about your build and know what kind of items go with that. And maybe those have a little bit better odds of dropping. And that's kind of the thing that you're looking for. There are lots of ways to kind of solve this, but in general, in the past, I've left it up to pure randomness, which hasn't always worked out real well. I think that, kind of future, more modern aRPGs have a lot of systems to ensure that people feel rewarded, even if it is a little bit, faked or encouraged or, whatever behind the scenes to try and get that timing and feeling right to happen.
So I just want to add a small thing on this topic, because when you have a really large player base, it's really hard to balancing that feelings to each individual, right? Because in the first 1 week, we already have more than 1 million players join our game. So, but what we are thinking is, there's one option is that one solution is we want to give this option was these flexibilities to the players. That's how we did in our end game NetherRealm. So we actually, on the top of it, we add a card system. The card, a deck. You can build up a deck. It's actually on top of the end game. The decks, actually, different players can build with different decks to customize their looting experience. I think So Tenkiei, you already make another video about this, right? So you can feel, so that's how I can just give the freedom to the players. Then they can adjust it based on their play style. So that's how we're thinking on this. Yeah.
Just in endgame in general, what are you really looking for? Because no stranger to aRPGs at all. What are you looking for in endgame?
Yeah, that's a great question. A good amount of replayability. I want to be doing an activity that I have fun doing, that feels rewarding, feels worth my time. I want to be able to log in, every day. Let's say whether I have an hour, whether I want to spend more time. And I want to be engaging with the activities in the game that are the most fun, because sometimes games will give you a variety of things to do, but we kind of like some of the activities a lot more than others. And just throwing in things just for the sake of having them isn't always the best idea. So focusing on the core, most fun aspects of the game and building layers upon it in the way that, Torchlight Infinite has that end game system with, the multiple, the decks and all that, where you feel like there's that meta progression through taking on those different bosses and getting deeper and deeper in, keeps you coming back more, feeling like I'm making progress towards some bigger goal, in addition to getting loot along the way, which of course is probably the most fun aspect. But just that no matter what, even if you don't get that loot, I'm still building towards something. Now, at this point, the rest of the discussion moved into the topic of monetization. But I just wanted to give here now my thoughts on what makes a good aRPG. What are my 3 pillars? We've had some fantastic thoughts here given by the dev team, by David Brevik. And I think when I think about an aRPG and what I think makes a great aRPG, I like to compare it to a road trip, where you have 3 main components. You have your destination, where you're going, plus, let's say, the pit stops along the way. Maybe you have one of those multi-destination road trips, but The ultimate goal is what's important here. You have the roads that you're traveling on, the path you take, and then you have the vehicle you're driving. And so in this analogy, the vehicle you're driving, that's the core gameplay of the aRPG. A road trip's going to feel very different if you're in a beat-up Honda Civic or if you're in a Ferrari. You need the core gameplay to at least be functional. It has to actually get you to the destination. It can't break down. There can't be bugs. It needs to, at minimum, be able to travel the distance across the roads. But, of course, a smoother ride is going to make it a more pleasurable experience. Some people are going to want to just joyride in that Ferrari. But it's all in service of something greater. If all you have is a good vehicle and no trip planned and no destination, well, it just gets boring after a while. Yeah, you might log in, play to kill monsters for 30 minutes, but then you have no real incentive to keep coming back. Now the roads. You and I might have a road trip to the same destination, but we might plot completely different routes to get there. This is build diversity. And this is based on the systems in your game. How you allow your characters to customize their builds, customize their path across the country on this road trip. I might make the same road trip multiple times in my life if I can get there in different ways and experience a new vista, a new scenery. But if I know it's going to be a 3-day trip across that same boring road over and over, I might not be as incentivized to repeat this trip in the same way that I might not be incentivized to play the game over and over with new characters and new builds. And then lastly, we have the destination. While these are the 3 most important aspects of an aRPG, I do feel that the destination here is the most important, and that is the loot. That's the reason for the trip. We would not play or keep playing an aRPG if not for the loot hunt. And in order for the loot hunt, for that destination to be appealing, you need a strong basis of a solid itemization system. Loot needs to be exciting, and for loot to be exciting, your itemization system needs to be robust. So those are my personal 3 pillars of the aRPG. I wanted to express this on the panel, but I didn't want to monopolize everyone's time with my rant about cars and roads. But we'll move on now to the part about monetization.
You know, there's been a lot of talk about monetization in general in aRPGs and, you know, Torchlight as well. A lot of people have been talking about, you know, is the game pay to win? It comes up all the time. I've seen people in chat saying it, asking questions about it. And I want to open that up to actually talk about, you know, how you guys feel about the game and how you guys actually feel about the genre moving forward. And, you know, Rhykker, we could start with you as well, right? Because, I mean, you've played titles in particular that have changed a lot over time. You've played aRPGs, which have changed a lot over time. So when we're looking at the monetization in aRPGs, how do you feel?
Yeah. So over the past, I want to say year, we've seen the entry of, I guess, mobile games come into the genre where we didn't really see that in the past. It's always been a PC gaming genre. And the reality is there's different monetization models that work on different platforms. We see a lot of resistance on the PC side of things towards monetization models that are more mobile friendly or mobile centric. So it's, you know, no surprise we've seen a lot of negativity towards anything that that's perceived as pay to win, as paying for an advantage. Again, now we're seeing more games released that are free to play. They're introducing things that some players are more receptive to than others. And I know some of us are much more staunch, like old school guys that, you know, I'm like cosmetics only. That's what I'm happy with. But I know some people are, you know, they're okay with paying to speed up progress or certain things. I think what's important in this discussion is that we understand, I guess, you know, there's the label pay to win, but at some point we've lost track of what exactly that means. Some people feel it means something very extreme, and then others are like, well, if you're not winning, is it really pay to win? I like to talk more about what exactly we're spending money on, and then does that matter to you? How much does that impact? I know that in the closed beta, for instance, of Torchlight Infinite, you guys listened to feedback and you made some changes, which were very promising. If I can turn the question to the devs, now that we're in another beta period before launch, are you guys still open to making more changes in that regard? Are you still listening to player feedback on monetization?
Sure. If we're talking about feedbacks, I think Ian can
So,
jump in.
like we said, we are always open to feedback. So one of the most time I spend on work each week is to collecting all of players' feedback and having an internal discussion about the dev team, whether it's which one of them is the one we're gonna focusing on, make adjustment to it, and talking about the monetization model is the different approach I think we take rather than other companies. That the form is not what we think, because we want to create a sustainable and a long-term healthy. We want to bring new content each season to the game, and also we want more players to have access to our game.
We definitely, of course, we will constantly listen to the community. So actually, I spend all day on Discord and check all the reviews on Steam and other community. So we think as a modern game developer, that it's vital. It's to listen to your players and respect them. So if you check the changes from CBD3 to OBD, actually a lot of changes is not by our dev guys. It's what just we collect plenty of the feedbacks and we really found them really good suggestions, and it can bring huge value to the game. And after we address these feedbacks and we just implement this suggestion from the community, and in the end we just get a better game experience. So the designers will missing out some point always, right? But the community always be helpful. So we will constantly do this and listen to our community, and everyone is welcome to give us more feedbacks. And another thing is we are a season-based game. So that's the nice part, because each season we can just see how the season goes and we collect feedback. Then in the new season, the game experience improved, and also we bring new content. So that's how the season goes.
The way we chose might not be the best option, but we're still collecting data and we are always open to player feedback. And yeah, we hope to create a long-term sustainable game in the future. Yeah.
On that topic, and I guess this might tie into the difference between PC and mobile monetization, do you guys feel that it's not possible to make a game that is also on mobile, because of course you're cross-platform, that has viable in the long term, sustainable, that is only using cosmetic microtransactions?
Really good questions. Actually, another question we discuss quite a lot internally. So first of all, we want share is Torchlight Infinite. When we start the project, we are targeting cross-platform players. So we are not only exclusive on PC or console, and we are not only a mobile title. So cross-platform is really challenging because, as I mentioned, it's a huge player base, and you can see how diverse and how different these players. They have totally different game experience, game background, right? So it's really challenging, I would say. But rather than if we are going to this approach or that approach to the previous company, we just set up several guidelines. We had two guidelines to our game when we design our monetization. We have a green line and a red line. So the green line means the monetization should be sustainable to support a healthy business cycle, because we are free to play and it's game as a service. We want to run the game in really long term. So if we cannot generate enough revenue to support the dev team, then we cannot deliver sufficient and high quality content to our players. So that's green line. So we should make sure our monetization should above this green line. But we also had a red line. The red line is David's last video, he already mentioned in his interview, one of the interview is the core is we do not want the monetization affect the core gameplay. That's a red line. If we cross this line, that means the player's general game experience will be impacted. That's definitely the thing we wanted. It's not the thing we wanted. So just take in detail. So for this red line, for example, we mentioned very clearly at the very beginning, we will never introduce PvP system in our game. So that means you don't. There's no incentive to win to other players, And again, we don't sell any how to say the in-game currency or these crafting materials, all this kind of stuff. We were never in a cash shop. It's all by loot. You loot for all of the things. It's like that. So there are just two very little examples, but we do have red lines. The in general is again. So we want the another word is actually I watched Tenkei's video. Tenkiei also did a really detailed breakdown of our cash shop and monetization, right? Maybe Tenkiei can also add some of your perspective from a player's side. So
as a player,
how
who
our
spent more than 100 hours
design,
on our
what's
game.
your opinion? And also want to listen to your feedbacks. Yeah.
Sure. So the first thing is, I think I've been in somewhat of a unique position. I've played Torchlight Infinite quite a lot, both in the closed beta test 3 and since then. But I've also been in communication directly so early on when there were some misunderstandings over things like the monetization test in the closed beta test 3, which, to be clear, I didn't agree with putting hero traits in a gacha system. That was definitely over my line. I had a way to communicate that and say, I don't like this. I hope this feedback's passed along. And I felt like I was listened to, and it got changed. I do not like gacha systems. I don't like loot boxes. I also don't like things that tie spending money, especially over time, to in-game power in a way that feels coercive. And I know that's going to feel different for many people. I've played plenty of games and I've talked to a lot of players of many games. Everyone draws the line differently. I don't think something like a battle pass for a new character feels coercive. Yes, you have to buy the battle pass if you want the character, but there's going to be a free path for it. Eventually, I know right now you can get space-time elapse for free. I'm guessing that in the future, Thea will also be available for free for the tokens.
For the new heroes in the season pass, we'll have a plan. Of course, we will introduce a new hero in each new season. And in the next season or the later on, the new hero or hero trait, of course, will fall into the hero shop, and you can direct purchase it. And of course, we will introduce the free currency to free-to-play players to collect them. Yeah, that's our plan.
We're taking those as champions in League of Legends. So yeah, that's more like the way how we design the entire thing.
I think that, breaking it up with the red line and the green line, I've definitely seen a lot of different titles take a lot of different routes, right? And I think that red line is a very good thing to define, because there's some games that I've played where, maybe one of the core gameplay loops that does progress your character, every single time you play it or are trying to play it, you need to pay to actually do it. In other games, sometimes, and I think 10, this kind of goes off of what you were talking about, there are moments where you feel like you can't progress forward without clicking that random banner that just popped up on your screen. But I think a lot of these things are so nuanced that, the idea of pay to win is always kind of thrown around as a blanket term. And, when one person is saying it to another person, their terms really don't mean the same thing. Like for me, when I'm talking about pay to win, I'm talking about like a PvP game where I am straight up taking out my wallet and I am battling against somebody else's wallet. And anybody who watches my stream knows that I do that all the time. I will admit, I do play those games, and I very much know that I'm playing a pay to win game, and that is what it is. And I will tell anyone that that's what it is. Now, when people start seeing battle passes and things like that, and they consider that pay to win, I think they're completely different things. I don't even think that they're remotely on the same planet. And I'm curious, David, when you're looking at all these things that change, you've been here at the dawn of aRPGs. You were involved in the genre, even being able to come alive. What's your view on how this has all shifted over time?
Well, it's fascinating. One of the things that is kind of new that we kind of have touched on here a little bit is that we're seeing mobile aRPGs really kind of for the first time. And in general, mobile titles are free to play. And that has a huge impact on how you design your game and what you're going to charge for and all this kind of stuff. And now kind of two worlds are colliding between PC world and console world and what they're kind of used to, which is like, maybe, a single purchase kind of things. And then now we've got mobile and it's like, I don't know, chocolate and peanut butter coming together. And so like new things are going to have to be tried there, and there's going to be different ways to approach this problem. The fact of the matter is that on mobile, you won't get users unless you're free to play. Like the flat metrics are out there that charging for a product just doesn't work on mobile. So if you're going to have a mobile title that's also on PC, you're want to get all those mobile users, and you're going to need to be free to play. So that already sets the stage for what kind of business model you need to use. And then it's like, okay, we're having these green lines and red lines, and different people have different red lines and green lines, and you're going to have to charge for something. Like you can't just make games for free. Like a lot of people. I feel like there's a lot of entitlement with some of the gamers about like, give me everything and give it all to me for free. But come on, there has to be some kind of way that the devs are, get money to actually create a business to actually make the, feed themselves and make the game and the content. It is a business. I think it's a tricky thing to do. I think that the Torchlight Infinite group is doing a fantastic job listening to the audience, making changes, trying to be as thoughtful as possible, and coming up with a system that hopefully will appeal to everybody. And having those kind of like that, I think that people throw the term pay to win around. They do it for as a clickbait kind of thing. It's like, oh my God, it's pay to win, and whether or not you believe it is pay to win or not or whatever, I mean, we can debate that to death, but I don't really know if that helps anything. The fact is that people are going to have their views, and whenever kind of monetization happens in a free-to-play world, some people are going to like it and some people are not. And traditionally, you didn't hear about it that much because there really isn't the same kind of community feedback on mobile stuff like there was on PC. Mobile's been free to play. It was kind of a built-in expectation, and now that more games are trending towards free to play on PC, you're getting much more vocal audience. So there's kind of these lines and these battles that be drawn, and I think that having the green line that they have in Torchlight Infinite of it, you can play the entire game for free, is super generous. You can get through all of the content for free, loot all of the things that you want to loot, or make the builds you want to build. All of that kind of stuff is pretty spectacular, and it's a very generous model. So I think that that overall, that's I think that their monetization is really thoughtful and great.
Yeah, and just to jump in with something that I don't think gets talked about a lot. This sort of monetization on PC has existed for really as long as I can remember, but it was free-to-play browser games, which were very much a thing in the early 2000s. They were on Facebook, Congregate, all sorts of sites. And then they kind of died out, but they didn't really die. They moved to mobile. And it's always been that they were free-to-play. There were good ones that treated players well. There were bad ones that made you feel like you're a second-class citizen if you're not paying them. I remember one of the games, there's this pop-up that would literally say, hey, loser, you should buy this. And it's like, what? You think I'm going to give you $1 if you call me a loser? I then closed the game and never returned to it. My own experience because I've played a lot of games that would generally be agreed as pay to win by a lot of people or not pay to win. When monetization gets in the way of me having fun and playing the game, it's a problem for me. There's certainly some aspects of Torchlight Infinite, like the pack spirits, that I'm not a fan of. I don't like randomization in anything that's paid. I'd much prefer if the packed spirits ideally didn't have any in-game effect, but if they did, that they're just in the shop and it's, a price. I honestly don't care, $20, $2,000. I don't care the number, but just you pay an amount, you get the pet. I prefer the skins. You pay an amount, you give a pet. At the end of the day, though, if I never pay any money into that system, if I just buy the battle pass, buy some stash space, I'll be able to do everything. I'll have a great time. I don't feel held back in any way.
Yeah, that's honestly the green line that we talk about, is because we want to guarantee the core gameplay as a free-to-play player can experience all the end game content and can honestly experience all the experience that a paid player could have. So that's what the red line and green line thing brings up in Torchlight Infinite. It's like,
I will be just full transparency from my end right now. My chat already knows this. Like, I am a filthy pay to win player in everything I do. You know, I play gacha games all day long. I love it. It's something I have a lot of fun with. I didn't even realize how the pack spirits actually worked at the beginning of the game. And I had pretty much beat everything. I knew that, you know, you could get pack spirits, but I didn't really realize, like, okay, like this pet's going to be able to do this any better. And I didn't need the power from it. It wasn't like content was gated behind a level of power that I felt forced to get the pack spirits. And there wasn't like this moment where it was, you know, you clear your first dungeon. So it's like, hey, you can get like 800% value pack spirit right now. You know, like I didn't have those moments. So when you're talking about that green line, what was your goal with the pack spirits? Like, what did you actually want it to feel like for the player, if you're not necessarily gating them behind something to need to rely on those pets?
So just back to how we design the core gameplay and the monetization. So as a developer, of course, we have to think both of the things. As a player, maybe you only care about the core gameplay, right? I want the game to be fun and right there. But as a developer, we had a relatively large team. So we want things. So that's why I said the green line. So we should add something or to generate some revenue to support the dev team. But how we did this, to my perspective or our team, there are two approaches. So one approach is you integrate the monetization with the core gameplay. So if you do this, you can feel that. So when you want to progress and you want to get more powerful, there is some way you can pay and you can get stronger. So that's one approach, and we see a lot of free-to-play games are doing this. But actually, as a player or even developer, we don't like this. It's not our goal to do this. But in the other hand, so we did in another approach. That means gameplay first, monetization second. And we use the word it's detached. That's the key. So you can see the pack system actually is detached from the core gameplay. You can,
Jack, I just came up with a great idea.
Yeah.
So Rich, you're such an experienced player and you've been playing all kinds of games. But do you think you can beat a hardcore free-to-play game player in Torchlight Infinite?
I mean, I'm willing to try.
Yeah.
I'm relatively confident I can do okay.
Yeah. So basically, what I think of is we're gonna do like a speed run thing, and you can have unlimited budget on Torchlight Infinite, while we will have some of our hardcore free-to-play players to do this race, I would call.
Yeah, facts speak louder than words, right?
Yeah, I think the explanation is just
we
not
don't need
that
to argue round.
Yeah. The thing is, it's not that convincing coming from our side as a developer. But why don't we do it like using the fact to show the entire thing?
Hey, look! I am willing. I am fully willing to have an unlimited budget in gameplay. Like that, I am fine. I am fine with that. I will go unhinged. I will try as hard as I can in a race. It sounds great to me.
If you win, we will guarantee you get refund.
Yeah, of course.
Yeah.
There we go. I like that. All right. I'm definitely willing to give that a try.
Yeah, let's make a plan for detail, right?
Yeah, I'll think about the detailed things later on.
Really
we'll
good idea. Yeah.
Announce the entire thing if we set it up. Yeah, but what do you think about this plan? I'm
100% there. I mean, I don't know if I'll be able to win. And I know no matter what happens, my chat will always be there to make fun of me if I don't. So I know that they will be waiting to make fun of me. But yeah, I think that we can figure out what we race to and we give it a go.
Yeah, for sure. I'll set the detailed rules will be set later on. I'm pretty sure it will be fair to both of us. I guarantee that.
We'll share to the community
as well. Yeah, we want everyone to see what was going on here. Yeah, that's our plan.
I'm all about it.
Like, one last thing I want to address is that we're not like telling there's no difference. The design philosophy of the pact spiritism for us is for like life improving. So we're the race we're doing is simply like telling the gap or even the difference between a player, free-to-play player, and the paid player is not as huge as you thought. Like you can just destroy others with the progress, with the time saved. It's more like a way to support us. Yeah, that's how the entire thing works.
Well, look, there is a very popular clip of me that I think some people have probably seen before. I don't necessarily need to mention which aRPG it was, but I did spend in time well over 30, 40-ish $1,000 on. And I then PvP'd, and it was
44 to 0.
I saw that clip too.
Yeah. So I've had a moment where it was pretty clear that it was not I was right clicking and that was it. That was it. Everything was crumbling. I having already spent as much time in Torchlight as I have, I think I'm on my Flamejet character. I think I'm either level 92 or 93. And then I started to like mess around with some alts, right? And I spent a lot of time crafting and like playing around on the trade house. So I've put a lot of hours into the game. And in my experience, I do not think I'm going to have that moment where I'm cackling and I have my 4-0 moment.
I've played quite a lot of different builds between the closed beta and now, and it never felt like, oh, I was missing this pet. I mean, on my current build, I do so much DPS, but I can't even properly measure it anymore. And my pet is fixing my resists because I'm too lazy to fix my ring. And I forget what the other pets do. I think they're just blue quality pets because I was like, oh, these are level 3. I'll just throw them in and just forget about it. It's a system that very much feels detached from the core of the game and the core of the gameplay. And it's something that I noticed immediately upon playing. Going in, it was a concern. I still, again, philosophically don't like that the system exists, but it certainly hasn't gotten in the way of my enjoyment of the game at any point so far.
I'll keep it real. All of I switched recently to mess around with something. I did play around with the boons a little bit, like my second or third day playing. And I was hosting an event and I was playing on my phone, basically in between every segment I was on camera. And I messed around with the boons. Every single pet that I used was for like quant basically, or like things like that. Like I didn't use anything for power because I felt like I had done a good job getting player power. So it's going to be the first time if I do mess around with some of the other pets to even see what they're going to be offering, which I'm excited for.
And that about wrapped up the discussion, but more plans were happening afterwards and throughout to actually pull off that free-to-play versus paid player race. This is going to happen. Stay tuned. There might be ways for you folks to take part as well. You'll just need to provide video proof of yourself completing the challenges within the allotted time. But it's just great to see the dev team putting their money where their mouth is. And we'll hopefully have more to talk about in that regard. But that's going to wrap up this video. So thanks for watching. Special thanks to my Twitch, Patreon, and YouTube supporters for making these videos possible. If you like what you see on this channel and want to support the creation of more content, you can consider pledging on YouTube or Patreon and unlocking behind the scenes content, monthly virtual hangouts, and more. If you enjoyed this video, please share it. Check out these other videos and subscribe to join Rhykker's Raiders for more aRPG content.